Hi, I'm Bob Whitty with KPND in Sandpoint, Idaho. If I can be a fan of Skylight Books, LA's world-famous independent bookstore, from way up here in the Idaho Panhandle, then you can too from wherever you are. Visit the website, buy some books. You can even join their membership club and reap the benefits of supporting independent booksellers. Thanks.
Meet me on the softer side. Meet me on the softer side. Softer side of your heart.
Hi there, and welcome to the Skylight Books author reading series. You can find out about this and all of our other author events at www.skylightbooks.com, where you can also browse our inventory as well as order books online. You can also follow us on Twitter or even be our friend at facebook.com. If you'd like to talk to a real person, we can be reached at 323-660-1175. And don't forget, Skylight Books depends on listeners like you to help support us. So whether you're in our neighborhood or browsing online, buy a book or two to help ensure that we'll be around for a long, long time. Thanks and enjoy.
But right now we are here for Steph Cha, for Follow Her Home. Let me read you a little bit about her bio. First of all, she's an overachiever, graduate of Stanford and Yale Law School, and now she's written a novel. She lives right here in Los Angeles, California. Please connect with her on Facebook, Twitter, and Goodreads. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Steph Cha.
Hi guys, thanks for coming. This is my third event, and it's like all of my fifth time reading in front of people, so bear with me. So I think most of you know roughly what my novel is about, but it's a neo-noir, so it is a take on a very, very old genre. And specifically, it's an homage to this guy, Raymond Chandler, who wrote the Philip Marlowe novels. And I'm actually going to start by reading a paragraph from The Big Sleep, because it's the opening paragraph. This will be a nice warm-up for me. Okay. So this is the first paragraph of The Big Sleep. It was about 11 o'clock in the morning, mid-October, with the sun not shining and a look of hard, wet rain in the clearness of the foothills. I was wearing my powder blue suit with dark blue shirt, tie, and display handkerchief, black brogues, black wool socks with dark blue clocks on them. I was neat, clean, shaved, and sober, and I didn't care who knew it. I was everything the well-dressed private detective ought to be. I was calling on $4 million. That's our introduction to Philip Marlowe, who is Chandler's detective for, I think, 7 novels, maybe 7.5. I think the half was not finished by him, and it was also not very good. I want to read that because my first paragraph is a direct rip on that paragraph, and the reason is because Chandler was a man writing about a male detective, and he starts by describing everything Marlowe is wearing from head to toe, and that has a very different effect when it's a woman writing about a female character. So it stands as, I kind of hope that it was a direct enough homage that people would get it. If you don't get it, I guess it's a challenge to see it as something other than chick lit, because it does sound, it's a woman talking about her clothes. Okay. All right, so I'm going to start reading, and I'm just going to keep reading for maybe 5 minutes. So I hope you guys have drinks. You don't have drinks? All right. It was about 10 o'clock on a Friday in mid-July. The Los Angeles night warm and dry, the only wind rising from the whoosh and zoom of traffic on Rossmore. I was wearing a slinky black dress, black patent leather platform pumps, silver cascade earrings, and a black lambskin clutch. I was perfumed, manicured, and impeccably coiffed. I was everything a half-employed 20-something should be on the sober end of a Friday night. I was calling on an open bar at Luke's new apartment, ready to spend a little time and respectability on a blurry and colorful evening. Luke's place was in the Marlowe Apartments in Hancock Park, a complex towering pretty as a castle just north of the Wilshire Country Club. It stood less than 2 miles south of Hollywood and Ivar, where its namesake found his vocation. But the Marlowe was a luxury apartment more likely to house the rich degenerates of Chandler's novels than his wisecracking private eye with a heart of noir gold. Luke's loft was on the 3rd floor. I entered the building from Rosewood through an iron gate propped open by yesterday's Wall Street Journal, then passed through a plush outdoor patio and a furnished lobby offering complimentary coffee. The Marlowe featured a fleur-de-lis floating in the valley of an M as its logo, and fleur-de-lis peppered every plausible surface of the place, from the spikes on the gate to the hallway walls and elevator doors. I rode up to the 3rd floor and found Luke's apartment, tucked in a corner behind a black door with 3 squares staggered in white geometric outlines from top to bottom. A printout taped to the door commanded in bold black font, "Come on in and lose the shoes." I turned the knob and laughter and hip-hop spilled out at the first crack in the doorway, the pulse of the subwoofer smacking my ribs with a little less force than cardiac arrest. A landfill of footwear clogged the entrance. Flip-flops, Birkenstocks, loafers brown and black, Nikes and Converse, floral-printed espadrilles, round-toed ballet flats in 12 colors. I looked down at my glossy pin-thin heels and scoured the floor for a friend. A wadded yellow sock peered at me from an unlaced sneaker, and as I started to surrender, I saw the pair that made mine look like Sunday shoes. They were tall, pointy, and painted in glitter, with blood-red soles and scarce-worn insoles reading Christian Louboutin. She was about as hard to spot as a clown in a prison cafeteria, wearing just a shade less makeup, tarred and sequined in steel gray from bust to mid-thigh, earlobes hoisting oversized Eiffel Tower chandeliers. She clocked in at about 5'1" on a tall day, and except for some heavily jeweled wrists, she would have been easy enough to smuggle and carry on luggage. Her left hand held the conic bowl of a martini glass in a loose circle between thumb and forefinger, and her right hand gripped the sleeve of Luke's button-down mid-bicep. Her long, dark eyes squinted as her wide, red mouth gaped with silver laughter. Loose curls dyed a toasted honey brown fell past her shoulders, ends trembling on a modest bosom. She crinkled a nose that could hide behind a penny. One crooked incisor poked just a couple millimeters ahead of her front teeth. This would be her moneymaker, the Cheshire detail, the bite mark in your memory. Okay, that's the first part that I'm going to read. And I did want to read that because it does start with a woman talking about her clothes, and then there's even a label in there. Actually, people really latched on to that Christian Louboutin. It doesn't come back. But I think both my editor and a blurber talked about the Christian Louboutin heels, and I think it's just something that stands out. And I think it's for perfectly reasonable reasons, but I thought that was interesting. So, second part I'm going to read is when she actually finds the corpse. And it's 40 pages into the book, so I don't think anything gets spoiled because it's all there on the jacket copy, which I wouldn't read, but so in between what happens is Song, that's the main character, gets introduced to Lori Lim, who's this diminutive paralegal or legal recruiter who works at her friend Luke's dad's law firm, and he asks her to investigate whether or not they're having an affair. And so she starts to do this by driving Lori home because Lori's drunk. And then she gets knocked out, which is a very typical thing that happens in every Chandler novel. Actually takes some of the suspense out of it. He always gets knocked out. And then finds a body. because that's the other thing that always has to happen. You don't really have crime fiction without at least one body. So here's the body. I pulled into the garage and slammed the brakes on the slope to my spot as a jogger with a death wish bunny hopped across the ramp. A thud sounded from the trunk, and I felt my stomach drop as if my intestines had been yanked out from underneath it like a magician's tablecloth. It could have been a bag of bowling balls, maybe a floor lamp. It was definitely not the shopping bag of dry cleaning that I had put into my empty trunk the morning before. I slid my car into its space, crooked and hasty, like I was stealing home. I slipped the stick to neutral, yanked on the emergency brake, and stepped out of my seat without turning off the engine. I don't drive stick. I have no idea how to drive stick. I let myself hesitate for just a few seconds, then reached in for the latch. I closed my eyes and pulled until it popped, and the trunk was open. I gave the door enough force to rise, and I stood back as it rose with the measured theatrical pace of an elevator unsealing, revealing. Bile bloomed harsh and thorny at the back of my throat. I suppose I already knew what was in there. In the dark of a Los Angeles night, I had been clubbed down and left out cold. This was a new reality with new rules, and it was about time to toll the body count. Marlowe always managed to describe every detail of a room before coolly settling his writer's eye on the petrified body with bound ankles and a knife in its face, sprawled out in a pool of gore on the middle of the musty oriental carpet that looked, 40 years ago, like it had seen better days. My trunk offered little to work with, but I wouldn't have noticed the gardens of Versailles jammed into that spare space for the fact of death staring at me from within. I grabbed my knees, turned my head to the right, and threw up. A spotted confection of brown, orange, and pink hit the pavement like spilled chunky soup. By the time it settled into a couple of motionless pools, I was vomiting again. I huffed deeply, 1, 2, 1, 2, then heaved until there was nothing left. I spit and lifted a hand from where it gripped my kneecap to wipe the slime from my mouth on the flat of my wrist. I forced myself to look at the body. It was a strange he, thank heavens. His long string bean frame lay crumpled at the hips, knees collapsed and pointing to the back of my trunk. His candy-bright red hair was well kept, even after what had to have been a bumpier night than mine, spiffy with gel and a perfectly executed interpretation of bedhead. He wore a close-fitting button-down shirt in white and lilac pinstripes, unbuttoned a button or two too low. The lean expanse of tan skin peeking out from underneath was unnaturally hairless. Brown Ferragamo loafers and thin distressed blue jeans finished the outfit. His torso was contorted so that he lay on his back with his face looking up at me. It was an unlovable face. Unlovable. It was an unlovable face. With twisted eyebrows, meager chapped lips, and a nose so narrow it barely had a bulb. When it mattered, maybe hours, maybe days ago, he might have been somewhere in the neighborhood of 29, 31. It didn't matter anymore. His muddy brown eyes were open, fixed in panic and disbelief. There was no blood that I could see, no holes, but a crude ribbon of bruises and narrow scratches spread across his neck. Strangled, if I had to guess. The fingernail marks might have been his own. I lowered the back of my hand into the trunk space and touched it, just barely, to the dead man's cheek. I don't know what I expected to gain from this gesture, but it proved pointless. The temperature, neither notably hot nor cold, was unrevealing, and the skin felt like regular old cheek skin, only I knew it was dead, and I couldn't untouch it. I scraped the back of my hand against the skirt of my dress, but I couldn't unfeel the touch I absorbed with my skin, even as the fact of sensation fled from my mind. I rubbed and rubbed, trying not to keep staring at the corpse. I stopped when it started to smart, and I shook out my hand, then popped the wrist. The sound was crisp and satisfying, and I popped the other and cracked every knuckle I knew I had. The garage echoed. I think that's it. So that's what I'm going to read today. And then, do you guys have questions? Because I'm actually much more comfortable with this part. Oh God, somebody have a question.
Can you talk about Chandler, just about his relationship to Los Angeles and your relationship to Los Angeles?
Yeah. So, God, I first read I read The Big Sleep when I was a freshman in college, and I really loved it because it's this it's a really great novel. You guys should all read it. It's seminal and wonderful, and I think you really can't understand my novel completely without it. I think it works without it, but it's a great novel. So Chandler wrote it. If you guys have seen any of these spoofy, hard-boiled detectives, Philip Marlowe is one of the originals. It's like him and Sam Spade. So if you've seen like Tracer Bullet, the Calvin and Hobbes alter ego, that's a classic Sam Spade type. But most of these fall into Sam Spade, Philip Marlowe. It's like that seminal. And so when I read him, I mean, it was pretty revelatory because his style is just really great. I mean, it's a style that's really easily and often spoofed, but whenever you read him, you take it seriously because he's just very good. But he writes about LA, and that's one thing that someone asked me to define noir the other day. It's actually a reporter at my high school's paper who pronounced it noir, and it was really adorable because I had no idea what noir was when I was in high school. But noir is very much about mood and tone and setting, and Chandler does it perfectly. I mean, you get a great sense of what LA was in the 40s and 50s, and it's just this gritty, beautiful, like geographically concrete landscape. And so that's what was compelling to me as somebody who lives in LA. His LA is almost unrecognizable. I mean, you can catch the stray street name and say like, oh, I kind of know where that is. Like Hollywood and Ivar, that's like where Amoeba is now. So you know, like those streets exist, but I think when Chandler was writing, the tallest building in LA was maybe City Hall. So it is a very different backdrop, but I like the sense of place that he provided. So I think that's why a lot of people who write neo-noir really respond to Chandler and really create like a sense of geography. And I wanted to do that with this novel. Which is, you know, it was a fun project in that sense.
Your relationship to Los Angeles?
Oh, my relationship to Los Angeles. I grew up here. I was born in Van Nuys, California, which I think until very recently was the porn capital of the world. And that's actually how I told people about where I was born. I think now it's in Silicon Valley. So I was born in Van Nuys. I grew up in the Valley. I went to high school in the Valley. Actually, my high school English teacher is here. Thank you for coming. And I haven't really left this place longer than a few months at a time. I went to school up north, and I would come home very often. I'm very attached to my family. Both of my parents are here. Actually, my brother's here too. So, you know, I would fly southwest from San Jose to Burbank like every month. My little brother was 5 years old when I went to school, and he actually complained that I came home too often. It's like such a jerk. So I haven't really, you know, even when I was at the East Coast, I came home in October, November, December, and then I stayed to January, and I came back in March. I mean, it was, you know, I really like the city. It means a lot to me. I can't imagine living anywhere else more than a few months. So, I mean, I think whatever I write going forward will be pretty rooted in LA, just because it's the place I know, and it's a place that I really adore, and that gets kind of short shrift in fiction. I mean, even though there's a very rich LA fiction tradition, I'm not saying there isn't, but you know, I lived in New York for a summer, and I love New York too, and I thought, oh, maybe I'll write a New York novel someday, and at some point I was like, yeah, right, why would I do that? Like, everyone's writing a New York novel. Like, it was the same impulse that had me thinking, oh, I'll write like a male protagonist someday. It's like, no, everyone else is doing that, so I'll just write what I know and care about. So, yeah, I mean, I'm pretty enamored of the city. I don't think I'll leave it.
Great. Yay for LA writers. Really. Any questions?
Steph, I know you're an avid reader, but can you talk about your journey as a writer and how you came into writing this novel, and then maybe what you have planned next?
Yeah, hold on one second. Oh, are we done here? All right.
Thank you.
My journey into writing. So I always liked reading, and I think the biggest piece of being a writer is to be a big reader. I think you can't have one without the other, unless you're going to be a really terrible writer. I mean, I guess that exists. I guess, yeah. But, yeah, I always read a lot, and then when I went to law school, I kept reading a lot. And then I realized that I didn't love law in the way that I hoped I would going in. I went straight after college, and I really did think I would like it, and I do like parts of it. Like, I like reading case law. I like some of the more analytical aspects of it, but I mean, and I went to school with like a lot of smart people who love the law and who are like infinitely smarter than I am in terms of embracing complicated aspects of the legal world, and it didn't speak to me, and then I worked in this terrible law firm that I hated, so I just decided I would start writing and see what happened. And then what happened was I had enough of a book that I decided I would just keep going with it. And then I don't know, I mean, I still do legal stuff. That's my bread and butter, doc review. It's really boring and it's not going anywhere, but I mean, I'm still attached to it. But yeah, I mean, I think once, and I've noticed this too with like the online writer world. Like, I've met a bunch of people who write through Twitter and all those different avenues, and the common thread is like people who read a lot. And also, when you come to these readings, I come to these readings often actually because I live right up the street, you run into a lot of people who write. Because at some point, when you really care about the written word, I mean, you get kind of greedy, because writing is one of those things that really anyone can do. So if you see enough of it, like, that spark kind of goes off and you think, well, maybe. So I think that is what happened to me.
What area of law?
Oh, what area of law? Nothing. I mean, I think you don't have to specialize the way you have to in undergrad when you're in law school. So in an alternate life where I like tried really hard and studied really hard and got to do whatever I wanted in the legal world, I think like public defense would have been really interesting, and I know people who do that now, and I think it's or like adjacent fields, and it is actually something that's fascinating to me, but I never got there. My studies were just kind of all over the place. Evan?
Does your knowledge of the law or your interest in the law at all, does that affect your decision to write crime fiction, or does it bear on writing crime fiction, or are they just completely separate?
They're pretty separate. And I think the reason for that is that I never had the meaty legal career that a lot of people have in law before turning to fiction. Actually, I've met a lot of lawyers turned fiction writers, and that's a huge, like it's a club, and it's not something I've seen defined like that, but there are tons of writers who make that switch, and I think it's because, I mean, like, I was an English major who went straight through to law school, and if I just followed that path, I would have ended up working at a law firm, and it's like a pretty natural progression, because it's just, if I didn't look elsewhere, I think that's just where I would have ended up. And I think that happens to a lot of people, and then they go back to it later in life. So I've met this woman named Alison Leota who writes crime fiction, and she was like a DC prosecutor for like many years. She had this whole career, and then like decided that she saw enough great stories doing what she did that she could then turn those into writing. I don't have anything like that. If I wrote a novel about doc review, it would be just trash. It would be so boring. I mean, I know like a few of you guys are lawyers and you've done doc review. Like, there is no material there. So I don't think, like, I think something that might be interesting that would require a lot of research of me is like maybe writing about capital punishment. But again, that's something that if I decide to do that in the future would require a lot of research. It's not something that I have ready to go. There are a lot of interesting, rich topics in law, but I don't think I ever developed the requisite expertise to write about them intelligently in fiction. Naomi?
Can you talk about the development of your character and she as you turn in another book?
Yeah. So my character is Juniper Song, and she's a 26-year-old Korean American who comes from a kind of dysfunctional, separated family, and she's somebody who graduated from Yale undergrad and now like tutors part-time just to pay the bills and is just otherwise kind of a drifter, which there's some autobiographical elements in there in that if I weren't writing I'd be a total drifter, but yeah, actually when I wrote her I was 22. When I conceived her, anyway. I was 22, and I was like, this is this really mature woman who's, like, navigating the streets of Los Angeles. And now I'm 27, and I'm like, I guess it works. But I wanted to write a Korean-American character who wasn't talking about being Korean-American on every page, but who was also not interchangeable with a white character. So, like, if you switched her out for somebody who wasn't Korean, it wouldn't quite make sense. There's, like, an immigrant story there, and she's embroiled enough in K-Town and that world that it just wouldn't make sense to swap her out. And I wanted to write that because that's been kind of my experience. I'm second generation. I speak barely enough Korean to get by. My parents are first generations but speak English and have no resemblance to the family in the novel, I have to say.
Just to make sure.
My family is great and would make a really boring novel, just to clarify. But I did want to write a Korean American character without writing an identity novel because I felt like it, and that's not to say that I don't enjoy identity novels because I do and I think they're important and I might write one in the future. But I wanted the freedom to be able to say like, no, I don't have to, just because I'm Korean, I don't have to do this. And the other thing is she's a woman and has unfeminine characteristics. While again not being interchangeable with the man. There's a part where she gets knocked out, which is before that part I read, where she has to address in her head like whether she's been sexually assaulted, which is not something that Marlowe ever had to think about. And I wanted to incorporate that aspect too, without it being like, oh my God, like whatever people expect of women in mystery, right? So. Yeah, that was important to me. Yeah. Oh, and then as far as future stuff goes, I have like 100 and some pages of a sequel that we're shopping like now, and my editor has it, so hopefully something happens with that. We'll see. If not, I'll keep working on it, but I have other projects in mind, so hopefully we'll see more of her in print. But it's like kind of out of my hands now.
One more question.
Mm-hmm.
Do you consider noir to be genre writing? And if so, do the parameters of genre writing feel restrictive to you? Or do you enjoy the sort of puzzle-like aspect of making them new and fresh, both to you and your audience?
So noir is by definition genre writing, and if I I mean, I haven't checked where it's shelved here, but I imagine it would be shelved under mystery, like Chandler is under mystery. A lot of good detective novelists that I read are shelved under mystery. And I think genre is kind of interesting. It's a different, like, there's a different approach to genre writing and reading. I think it's certainly less prestigious, and it does have these set rules and that can be kind of hokey. And sometimes, and it's true that like a lot of genre writing doesn't require good writing. On the other hand, I respect genre writers, and I mean, I obviously am one. I respect genre writers. I think there's a lot of interesting stuff you can explore. Especially, I mean, noir is great because I think it's such a good tool for exploring different what's the word, stratums of society, because there are few kind of protagonists or characters who have the same level of mobility as the private detective. You can go anywhere, and you could talk to 8 people in a day, and that's totally normal, and that's part of the job and part of the story, and it's almost a requirement. So you can, I mean, some really good noir I've read has revealed worlds, and I think the best noir really does that. Actually, Naomi, who's here, Naomi Hirahara, she writes about, she writes a protagonist who is an A-bomb survivor from in Hiroshima who grew up in the States. And it's really interesting to read about that character because you find out, yeah, he's solving this mystery, which is very entertaining, but you also get to see like what he's experienced in his life. And I think, the best noir kind of does that. It's revelatory. And I think like noir traditionally has sprung, I think the genre kind of sprang out of this post-World War II melancholy where, in Chandler writes about the corrupt streets of LA, and that's kind of where his novel sprung up from, in that like you kind of just see corruption and darkness and meanness everywhere. And in my book I wanted to talk about like Asian fetishism, and I thought like there aren't too many ways to explore that topic that are better and more handy than noir. And then as, hold on, you also said...
Do the working within the parameters of genre...
Yes, that's right.
Or is it a struggle to make it fresh to you in your audience?
So I will admit that like when I started out writing this novel, I thought that if I was going to write a novel, it would be easier to write a mystery. I did think that. I remember in particular, there was a lecture in my detective fishing class where my professor talked about how detective stories are kind of conservative in structure because there are a set number of things that have to happen and in a certain sequence. And so I thought, well, I can handle that. Like I have a beginning and an end in mind, and I can kind of create a linear story in which these things happen. And I do think that if approached the right way, mystery is easier to write than straight literary fiction. I'm also working on a novel that's just straight literary, and it is much more difficult because of that lack of the constraints. Actually, there's been talk about how Twitter is giving rise to like a whole new generation and different class of kind of poets and wordsmiths who are able to use that 140 character constraint in these interesting ways. I think when you add constraints, like you get some interesting stuff. Like I think some of my favorite projects in like high school and middle school involved like reworking fairy tales, or like I did one project where we were supposed to write something in kind of the voice of in that kind of stream of consciousness voice of Ulysses, and I thought those projects were really fun to do and kind of easier than if I were just given a blank page and said like, okay, fill this. And I think in that way the constraints of the genre are comforting. I think to make things good, you have to go beyond that, obviously, but it is a nice place to start. If you guys were all thinking of writing novels, I would recommend writing a mystery.
Do you know why that particular time in history might have been the golden era of
do you know why after the war? I mean, I can see women being objectified in the genre. There's a social angle. But have you ever thought of why historically that's where the war flourished?
Okay, I think, so she asked if I had any ideas as to why that was kind of the golden noir, age of noir, like post-World War II. And I mean, I do think that's kind of it. I mean, I should say I probably haven't thought of it too deeply because I'm not going to answer this in an intelligent way that goes beyond the question. But I think that era of melancholy and kind of hopelessness and helplessness, where you have new possibilities of atom bombs and whole countries decimating each other. I mean, I think that adds this kind of darkness to whatever your assumptions are, and I think that kind of creates good literature, and probably not just noir, but noir certainly saw a resurgence, or not a resurgence, but a very productive period after that.
Really graceful. Thank you so much for answering.
Thank you.
Thank you all very much.
Thank you guys so much.
You've been listening to the Skylight Books author reading series. Don't forget that you can check out this and all of our other great podcasts at www.skylightbooks.com. Today's music was provided by Fragile Gang. You can check them out at MySpace, Facebook, and the iTunes Music Store. Thanks for stopping by, and we hope to see you soon.